Hi, I'm Kit McPherson, the owner of Maple Leaf Property Management. I welcome you to our educational series. One thing that our owners ask about quite a bit is insurance and what type of insurance. And so I've invited Al Moreno here today. Hi, Al. Um,
Thank you.
to give us some information about insurance. Al does do most of my single family and multifamily insurance. He has a tremendous amount of knowledge. And we thought it would be great. We're going to have him here, ask some questions, and give you a little bit more information about insurance. So glad to have you here, Al. I appreciate how much information you always give me. And how about we get started on what type of insurance should someone have when they either move their primary residence over to a rental or they buy a rental?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kit. I'm happy to answer any questions you have today. So looking forward to it.
Al.
But yeah, to first address the situation you're mentioning with somebody who, for example, would already have an owner-occupied home and is going to begin to rent that home out. We really want to, at the point that they're going to be having the renter move into that house, change over the insurance. A lot of people will use the term like landlord insurance. You might hear home protector insurance. There's a lot of different terms. Essentially, all that means is an insurance for somebody who has a non-owner occupied dwelling. It's very similar to the home insurance that you would currently have. The gap that you're going to have there is we're not going to have coverage for personal property, thinking that obviously the property inside the home would at that point be that of the renters. So we're still protecting the dwelling from a lot of the same perils that's going to be fire and wind and pipe breakage and things like that. But in terms of the personal property for the renters, that's going to be the gap in coverage there. And so they're going to have to come in with the renter's insurance for that piece.
So it does not cover any of their personal belongings. It just covers the
That's
property.
correct. Just the property, yes.
Yeah. So do you have recommendations on like how much insurance someone should have, like as far as like liability or like just what that would look like?
Sure. We usually recommend that our rental owners would have about $1 million in liability. I think is a good starting point. Even without an umbrella policy at that point, you know that you're going to be protected. At the end of the day, even though the renter should have renter's insurance, a lot of these attorneys are going to be able to try to attach themselves to your property anyways. And so it's really one of those things where we want to make sure that we have a sufficient amount of liability coverage. In terms of the dwelling coverage, it really should be the same as what we would have as an owner occupied. It's still going to have that same rebuild cost associated with the actual dwelling piece. So that part doesn't really have to change. We would recommend the higher limits of liability, and the biggest thing too would be making sure that those renters are having renter's insurance and listing you as an additional insured so that you're aware of the status of their insurance.
So, are there different types of policies? Is there something that a homeowner should, or now a new landlord should really be looking at besides the liability? I mean, are there things like, if the tenant is displaced for any reason, or is there anything that covers the rent that they would be getting that now the homeowner's not getting that rent?
Correct. Yes. So on the landlord policy, there is coverage for exactly that. So for example, a pipe bursts and floods the house, displacing the tenant. The tenant's going to have to go and stay, let's say, in a hotel temporarily, or if it's a long-term fix with a fire, maybe they're having to move into another rental on a short-term or mid-term type of basis. So we do have a loss of use coverage, and that's going to be essentially paying the rents that you're missing out on because of the displacement of the tenant. And then on the tenant side, their renter's insurance policy would also have a loss of use provision. That's generally $4,000 coverage. It can be expanded if you like. It's a lot bigger coverage on the landlord side. However, at least on the tenant side, you're going to have enough coverage for them, hopefully, to find something for a couple of months, and is usually expanded if the claim takes a long time to get finished up.
Oh, great. So one of the questions that we get is about pets. So are there breed restrictions at all on insurance policies? Because we do get, sometimes we will get someone that has a support animal that can be considered one of the restricted breed ones. How does that work?
So it varies widely throughout the industry. A lot of companies do have breed restrictions. Some of the common ones would be a Doberman. Actually, my wife and I have a Doberman. We see Pit Bull, Chow, some of those dogs. It just varies. So with Country Financial, we don't have any breed restrictions on the dog. So, whether they're a
Right.
service animal or not, we don't have any restriction to what we can insure. The issue would just come if it's a dog that has prior had a bite claim or something like that. We're going to look at that obviously a lot more closely. But in general, for any type of dog, we're not going to have an exclusion on our policy. But some companies definitely will.
So if someone does have like a pet, we usually recommend, well, we all of our tenants, we require insurance, and when they have a pet, we
Right.
require that the liability is higher. But should an owner also have a little bit higher liability if their tenant does have a pet? In case there's a
I wouldn't say
fire?
necessarily no, because I would recommend that any of our landlord owners are going to carry a higher level of liability anyways, and that should be more tied to the landlord's assets and income, more so than like the breed of the dog that the person that has it for. Totally agree with you though. Yes, if your tenant has a dog that could potentially, really any dog
Any
would be
dog,
a good idea.
little dog,
Because you never know. It could
they
be a golden
bite,
retriever, it could be a chihuahua that could bite, right?
they bite.
But want to
They
bump that
can.
liability up because you don't want to be in a situation where the limit of insurance is exhausted and then the tenant is trying to now finance this claim out of pocket, which is probably not going to be the case.
Yeah. Is there a big difference in insurance between, multifamily or a single family home? Like if somebody's buying a 4 unit or even a 6 unit or anything that's
Mhm.
multifamily, is there other things that they should be looking for if they're buying a multifamily property in insurance that's different than single family?
Sure. In actuality, no, it's very similar. It's just the difference is going to be the cost of the insurance will generally be higher because the cost of the building, to replace would be higher, just a bigger dwelling, more to it than that. But in terms of the mechanics of the insurance, do we need another piece of insurance or is there a different type of coverage within that policy between like the commercial type of rental and then the single family or two family type of home? No, the mechanics are really very much the same.
And would you recommend like an umbrella policy on if somebody is getting a larger building to just
I probably
for them or
would, yes.
yeah,
I would, and the reason being just because generally speaking, again, that value is higher. Your asset base is going to be a little bigger if you have these multifamily homes, especially, getting
yeah.
into that 8, 12 type of rental. If there's $1 million type of value or approaching that, even you got to just look at your portfolio in general. But yes, once you're getting into that, even really if you have 2 single family homes or 3 or a sixplex, as you're getting that asset base a little higher, I would definitely recommend moving towards getting the umbrella as well.
Oh, great. And Al does do all of this. So he's got umbrella
Yeah.
policies for me and single family and multifamily. Hey, Al, can you tell us a little bit about tenants insurance? I know the
Yes.
owners aren't getting that, but we'd love to, I'd like my owners and our
Right.
clients to know how it benefits them for our tenants to have tenants insurance.
Right. Yeah, tenants insurance is something that we really push, even just for our general client base here. A lot of people come in not having had that in the past, but on the tenant side, it's really important for them to have that for a number of reasons. A lot of times, the big selling point for me for tenants is that loss of use. Let's say you're living in a big apartment complex, and
Yeah.
the person above you has a pipe burst, right? That has nothing to do with you, but that's coming through your ceiling now, and you're displaced. If you don't have insurance, even though the person above you caused the incident potentially, there's no one to pay for you to go somewhere else. So a lot of times we're going to recommend that people have that just to have that coverage. The other piece would be like you're mentioning liability in a renter situation. A lot of times it does end up being like a dog bite. It could be also, let's say you start a kitchen fire in an apartment complex and you burn the whole complex down, right? You're going to be liable for that as the tenant. So the tenant needs to have coverage as well. It's also going to have obviously coverage for their furniture and their clothing and any valuables that they have. So we really think anybody that's renting a place should have that. And then on the other side for the landlords, very important that your renters have that because again, if they cause some sort of damage to the house or the apartment complex, who's going to pay for that? It's not likely that they're going to be able to, as the tenant, pay for all of the repairs out of pocket. Just as any landlord may not be able to pay out of pocket for $100,000 claim. So it's really important for the landlord side and also very important for the tenant side as well to have that policy in place.
So if there happened to be, let's say, a fire in a property, what all would and let's say it's in a kitchen and there's damage to the drywall, and besides the tenant's belongings, it also does damage to the kitchen itself, maybe drywall and the appliances. What would the tenant's does that all go to the tenant's insurance, even though some of it is structure? Or does any of it go to the owner's insurance?
That's a great question. So it comes back to a liability issue. So let's look at that same thing, maybe two different ways. Let's say the situation arises like you're describing, there's a kitchen fire caused by the tenant. Their liability insurance is going to pay towards that dwelling. And so let's say they have a $500,000 liability policy, you're likely going to be okay in that situation. Now, on the flip side, let's just say in the dwelling there is an electrical problem, something shorts out and causes a fire. That's not really the tenant's fault. So that's going to fall under just the home protector or landlord policy for the structure. And that's just going to be paid out under the dwelling coverage there.
Wow, that's great. That's really good information. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So are there anything else that you'd like to tell our clients on the importance of insurance, or anything that we didn't cover that they might be of use for them?
For sure. I think one of the biggest things, especially when you're buying a new, whether it's, again, an apartment or just a single family home, whatever that may be, is just getting a fair valuation. A lot of companies will just use, let's say, the sales price, which in our area over here on the other side of the state actually sometimes is really more insurance than they would need, but sometimes on the other side, you get the flip side of that where it's not going to be enough. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we do, a replacement cost estimator, where we really try to whittle down what the cost to our insurance company would be to rebuild that. Because if we have a situation where we have a total loss and the insured wanted to pay for a cheaper policy and only insured up to 60% of the value, there's an issue called co-insurance clause on that, right? We want that we're insured up to at least 80%. We recommend up to 100% of the replacement cost. So you could be left holding the bag a little bit if you intentionally would underinsure a dwelling just to get a lower price or a lower coverage amount. So just making sure that you have enough insurance in place for the dwelling piece is really, really important there.
That's a great point. That did happen to me once where it got by me, but luckily there were no, in fact, I think actually that's when I started moving things over to you.
I think so. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like our clients to know?
You know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm happy to answer any of the questions you have.
Well, how about you give them your contact information, and we'll also have his contact information on our website, so that you can go to our website and we'll have a link that you can go in and chat with Al via email, give him a call. He's very accessible. I chat with him often. So why don't you give him your contact information, Al?
For sure. The two easiest ways to get in touch with me would probably just be by phone here at the office. My number is 509-783-0586, or by email, and it's just my name, al.moreno@countryfinancial.com.
And you can always, if you forget all that, you can just Google Country Financial, Al Moreno, and it will take you to him. So I really appreciate you being with us here today, Al, and I know it was educational for everybody, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.